Hi everyone, Professor Phil Travis here, and it's week 5 here at EOU History 360, military history. And this week it is a lighter week for us, but we're looking at World War One this week. We're going to be reading Chapter 9 from Ways of War. We're going to be discussing some of the technological transformations that are occurring to war as it becomes increasingly industrialized between this period from the American Civil War to the First World War. So this week we're going to look at World War One, and we're going to consider some of the ramifications for the industrialization of warfare that we really start to see with these conflicts, particularly in this case this week, World War One. So it's a lighter week. Read Ways of War, Chapter 9. We're looking at the First World War. Now, I want everyone to be thinking ahead a little bit. Next week, week 6, we have our midterm exam. So we need to really be thinking about our preparations for this. I will give you a limited study guide for the midterm. I'll give you some pointers on what the essay question or questions will be. I'll give you a little general subject area next week on that. But I really recommend this week going back and reviewing some of the things we've read in preparation for next week's midterm. You might go back and look at the discussion forum. If you see things in the discussion forum with big headers that I put in there, it's probably a good chance that it could become a test question. So that's a good way to start looking back and reviewing some things. Make sure you're watching the weekly lectures, of course, in addition to doing the readings. I try on the tests, I try to emphasize the things that were pretty forward positioned in the class. So another thing to consider, though not exclusively, of course, all of our reading material, our lectures, and these types of things are game for the test. I try not to be too tricky on these things. I try to rely on the things we emphasize in the class, like in the discussion forums, in the lectures, quizzes, and these types of things. So our midterm is next week. Um, so make sure you're thinking ahead and preparing for that. The other thing I would say, if you haven't started reading the E.B. Sledge book With the Old Breed, start reading that now, because as we move forward, you're going to wind up, if you're not doing that, you're going to find in the second half of the class, we have 3 readers we're going to be reading in the second half of the class. I mean, we should be reading them throughout the class, but they're related to World War II, Vietnam, and the global war on terrorism, which will be making up the final 5 weeks of our class. And so if you haven't been starting at least Ways of War by E.B. Sledge, Ways of War with the Old Breed by E.B. Sledge, make sure that you do. I would recommend doing that this week when we have lighter readings and you can get into that book. I mean, all of the books that I've assigned in terms of those readers are pretty phenomenal, and so you should be able to read through them, you know, with pretty relatively quickly, I would think. So if you haven't started reading E.B. Sledge with the Old Breed, uh, be sure to start reading With the Old Breed by E.B. Sledge, because after our test, we're going to be getting into really moving towards that first paper, which is a 4-page paper in which you're going to basically look for developing continuities between E.B. Sledge with the Old Breed and Philip Caputo, A Rumor of War, finding some core similarities between those two narratives. And then, of course, our last paper, a shorter paper, a 2-page paper on Counter Jihad by Brian Glenn Williams, is due at the end of the term. Nice bonus points this week. Your bonus factoid this week comes from the video below, and just put that in the extra credit discussion forum. This video is 16 minutes long. I think you're gonna like it though. It's from a historical place, and it's worth 3 bonus points because it's a little bit longer. I'm making it worth 3 bonus points. I think you'll enjoy this video. It's not exactly from World War One. It's kind of like the aftermath of World War One, coming from the period in the decade and a half or so following the end of the First World War. But I think very relevant to the World War One perspective when it comes to warfare. And so I think that you're going to really find it a very interesting, firsthand historical um, tour from myself, from yours truly. So let's have a great week. Chapter 9, get into reading with the Old Breed from E.B. Sledge. Start thinking about next week's test, and let's have a great week. I'll see you in the discussion forum.